Hey everybody, by now you have all gotten reacquainted with each other, or you're getting to know maybe some new people that you haven't connected with yet through your life group. And this is the time every year when we make a decision to kind of help our life groups follow along with what's going on a Sunday morning. And so what we talk about on the weekends is processed within your life group. So really for the past year, we've been really praying and processing what is it that we want to focus in on as a church. It's a time of the year for our nation when we're talking, all sorts of things, particularly politics, and we're thinking about leadership and hearing all sorts of things as it relates to that. And so we thought, well, why not spend time really kind of processing the greatest leader that we know, and that's Jesus, and really looking at how he led and how his leadership should actually impact each and every one of our lives. I heard it said once, many, many years ago, that sociologists had done a study on leadership and influence, and what they had discovered is that the average person, just the everyday average person, influences about 10,000 people through the course of their lifetime. Just think about that. I mean, you're influenced in good ways and in bad ways, and in many ways in unintentional ways. You just get influenced by being around them, or you influence by your attitude, or by how you walk through a place, or by what other people see, or by what you may even say. But what would happen if every one of us who call Pathway home would instead look at that reality of that unintentional kind of influence and make a decision to actually be incredibly intentional with our influence, particularly as it relates to how we live Jesus out in our lives and through our lives, and how we interact with others, how we engage our culture, how we deal with life at work and where we learn, and even where we play, and with our friendships and our neighbors, and certainly with our family. And so over these next few weeks, we're going to do just that. We're going to spend some time looking into the leadership of Jesus and really beginning to ask ourselves the question, how then shall I live? And we're walking through a study we put together called Irresistible Influence, because when you really begin to look in the life of Jesus, I think his leadership is irresistible. You want to grab a hold of it, you want to learn from it, and you want to begin to, in some way, I don't know about you, but I'd hope for all of us, to embody it in some way, to live it out within our lives in some way. And so over these next few weeks, what we talk about on the weekend, you're going to process within your life group, and I think it's going to be really, really awesome. And this weekend is really just an introduction to what we're going to be talking about. There are many times in the Gospels where we see the leadership of Jesus lived out before us, and you certainly see it in how he interacted with people and the conversations he had. At times, those conversations that were led with a lot of grace, and yet with a tremendous amount of truth. There were times when his leadership came across incredibly bold in how he would potentially confront the religious leaders of his day. But what you see with Jesus is really kind of an attitude of deep humility, and that he really looked at the opportunity to lead out of who he really is, and to lead out of really the heart of a servant. Philippians 2 says that Jesus, he gave it all up, and he took on the form of a servant. He humbled himself, took on the form of a servant, and that he served men and women, and that he was obedient to God even to the point of death on the cross for your sins and for my sins. And that humility was lived out, and when it was lived out, it became infectious. It was a humility that wasn't lived out in such a way that Jesus demonstrated a haughty spirit where he wanted people to bow down to him. But in many ways, we see the posture of Jesus and that of a servant lived out from the very beginning until the very end, when actually, as we're going to see in our study, Jesus made a decision to go for a towel instead of a throne. And he bowed down and he washed the feet of his disciples. His disciples didn't quite get it though. they were thinking about a kingdom here on this earth, and Jesus was really talking about the kingdom of God coming to this earth. And there was even a moment actually in Mark where James and John comes up to Jesus, and he's talking about the kingdom, and they ask him, hey, listen, when you establish this kingdom, we'd like to kind of sit right up next beside you, is what we'd like to do. And Jesus really challenged that. And he really challenged it by the way of saying it, that really you need to understand that serving is not about you being served. Serving is about you serving. That it's not walking through life with kind of your chin held high, but it's kind of walking through life with your head hanging low, where you're engaging and you're seeing and you're really reaching out to the needs of those that are around you. It's not lived out with your kind of your hands held up looking for what others are going to give you, but as we saw with Jesus, it's really lived out with your arms stretched wide, really laying down your life for those around you. He had incredible influence. I don't know who the most influential person was in your life. Maybe when you were growing up, you had someone in your life that was incredibly influential. For me, I had to think hard about this. And for me, I have to go back to my mom. And my dad was as well. But my mom, she walked through cancer, through 7 years of battling cancer when I was a young teen, and I watched my mom battle it all the way to the point of death, and I watched my mom serve our family. I watched her serve my dad. I watched her serve my neighbors. There was just a sense of a heart for Jesus that penetrated her heart, and then it was lived out in the way that she did her life on a daily basis. It had a tremendous amount of influence in my life. And then I think about my life now, and my hope and my prayer is that I am hopefully living my life in such a way that maybe someday my kids will look back and they'll say, you know what, one of the most influential people in my life was my dad and how he lived his life. And I think I failed miserably at that. But I think all of us have some areas in our life in which we can really learn about how Jesus really demonstrated his influence. And maybe in some ways we can look at our own heart through this series and realize there's some things in me that need to change so that I can actually become even a little bit more of an irresistible influence to those around me. That's what this series is really all about. It's learning how to serve. It's learning how to lay one's life down. It's learning how to walk through life with humility. It's learning how to cultivate the fruit of the Spirit within our life. It's learning how to live with a posture as Jesus would have us live, of that of a servant, with not our arms reaching up, but our arms reaching out. One of the figures that I really have always found to be really inspirational is Ernest Shackleton, Sir Ernest Shackleton. Back in 1912, Ernest Shackleton took a group of 27 men with him on an excursion down to cross the Antarctic, and they piled into a boat, and they were going to head down that way to be the first ones to actually do that. And in the midst of their journey, if you know anything about the boat called the Endurance, the boat was frozen in the ice, and eventually the ice began to crush the boat. And these men found themselves stranded out in the middle of nowhere, wondering if they were going to live or they were going to die. And Shackleton, when you think about his life and the journey that took place here, is that Shackleton really, he took on the posture of a humble servant. It always impacted me. It's always impacted me. Always been one of those individuals that I've thought, this is some real incredible influence in the lives of others. And then it's taught me some things too. And that is that he made the decision to set aside his position and to set aside his goal for crossing to caring for every man that was on that ship. He told them, I'm going to get you off this. I'm going to get you home is what I'm going to do. And he just vowed to do that. And And then he made the decision to take aside and to put aside the title of skipper, more or less, to take on the role of being a servant, to serve his men. But he served with a great deal of boldness and courage and leadership. He just was determined that we are going to do this, and we're going to do this together, and I'm going to be the example of that, and we're going to end up serving one another as a result. And not only that, but he really set aside his needs for their needs. And he did his best to figure out what do they need and how best can I serve those needs to make sure that we all stay together. He moved from a posture of anxiety to a posture of great encouragement. He found ways for them to laugh together and for them to play together and for them to not become so embodied with their situation, but to realize that we still have a life to live in the midst of this situation. And we're going to do just that. We're going to keep on hanging on to hope. And then towards the end, Shackleton did something that others are looking at and have studied for years and wondering how in the world did he do this? But he got himself into one of their little lifeboats, and he made a decision that he was going to do the ultimate and lay down his life for his men by taking on an 800-mile trek across the ocean to find help to bring back to rescue his men, willing to lay down his life for his men. And he did just that. And he accomplished what he set out to accomplish. It was all about not looking up or holding up. It was all about looking out, figuring out what can I do to do what I need to do as a leader to humbly lead these men to a place of safety and to get them home once again. Jesus lived that example before us. He took on the form of a servant. He willingly got down amongst humanity, and Jesus with us, and lived in such a way that we have a God that we know fully understands us and gets us, that he came near, that he's near to us. He didn't stay in a distance, but he came near. And that ultimately he laid down his life for his friends, for you and for me. And so through this series, we're going to get a little closer to Jesus, and we're going to get a little closer to his heart. And my prayer is that he will become one of the most irresistible influences in your life and in my life as well. And that as we come close to Jesus and as we study Jesus, that in this season that we find ourselves in, that our church would become even more unified, that we as a people would walk with greater humility, and that we would do our best. We would do our best to live our lives not like this, what can I take or what can I get, but how like this, what can I give, and how can I live in such a way that maybe a portion of my life and my story and your life and your story can be an irresistible influence in the life of someone else for the gospel, for Jesus. So we'll see you later.